My name is Margaret Thompson, and I am 75 years old today. I have lived a long life filled with lessons, victories, and heartbreaks. But nothing, I mean nothing, cut me deeper than the day I discovered my own father's secret betrayal. It was not just any betrayal. It was one that destroyed me, left scars I carry even to this day. For years, I respected that man, trusted his every word, and believed he was my shield in a world that sometimes felt cruel. But behind my back, my father was hiding something so terrible that when I finally learned the truth, I swore one day, somehow, he would pay. I remember the night I found out. It was late, the air cold, the kind that sneaks under your skin. I was sitting by the window, holding an old letter in my hands. That letter revealed everything. My father had done something so unthinkable, so unforgivable, that my whole world crumbled. I could not breathe, could not speak, could not even cry at first. The betrayal wasn't just about me. It tore apart the very foundation of who I thought I was. And do you know what was worse? He acted as if nothing happened, like the truth would stay buried forever. But I knew in that moment, the man I once loved as my protector had become the very reason for my destruction. What exactly did he do? What secret did that letter hold? And how could a father shatter his daughter's soul like that? Well, my dear ones, that is where our story begins. But before I take you deeper into that night, let us walk back to where it all started, so you can understand who I am, who he was, and how kindness and love shaped me before life twisted into cruelty. Because without the beginning, you cannot understand the storm that came later. Now tell me, where are you watching this story from? I like to know. Whether you are in New York, Texas, California, or sitting quietly somewhere in Alabama, I want you to sit close because this story is not just about me. It is about betrayal, resilience, and the fire of justice. Let me take you back to when I was a little girl in Ohio, many decades ago. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other. Life was simple, but simple did not mean easy. My father, Richard Thompson, was a strong man in the community. He wore pressed shirts, shiny shoes, and he always spoke with authority. People admired him, trusted him, even respected him more than some of the pastors in church. To them, he was a role model. To me, he was Dad. The man who carried me on his shoulders, bought me candy from the general store, and told me stories before bed. My mother, Elizabeth, was gentle as a morning breeze. She never raised her voice, never let her anger control her. She believed in kindness, in giving more than she received. I learned empathy from her. When neighbors went hungry, she cooked extra meals. When children were lonely, she opened our doors. She always told me, Margaret, life will test you, but no matter what, keep your heart soft. A hard heart is heavy, but a kind heart can carry even the heaviest burdens. I had a younger brother too, Samuel. Mischievous as a fox, always running, always laughing. He drove my parents crazy, but made my childhood colorful. Samuel and I would play by the riverside, skipping stones, imagining adventures that took us far from Ohio. We weren't rich, but we were proud. My father worked as a banker, and his reputation meant everything. He often reminded us that our family name carried weight. A Thompson never fails, he would say. I believed him. We all did. But beneath that proud exterior, there were cracks. I didn't see them as a child, but they were there. Sometimes I caught him staring off, lost in thought. Sometimes he came home late with excuses that didn't quite add up. But as a little girl, I brushed it aside. Fathers don't lie, right? I want you to know something about me before we go on. I wasn't born tough. Life made me tough. I was born kind, just like my mother. I would rescue stray cats, share my lunch at school, and write little notes for people when I saw they were sad. I believed the best in everyone, especially in my father. But kindness, though beautiful, sometimes leaves you vulnerable. And my vulnerability would one day cost me more than I could imagine. Let me tell you about a memory from when I was 12 years old. It was winter. Snow fell heavy on our street, covering everything in white. I saw an old woman struggling to carry her groceries. Without thinking twice, I ran out, bare hands in the cold, and helped her carry them home. She lived 2 blocks away, all alone. She hugged me when I left, tears in her eyes, and she said, "Your kindness will one day save you, little girl. Don't ever lose it." I didn't understand then, but those words stayed with me. And later in life, when betrayal struck, I remembered her. Because sometimes, kindness is the only rope that keeps you from drowning when the waters rise. Life wasn't always hard. We had highs too. I remember birthdays where the whole neighborhood gathered, my father grilling meat in the backyard, my mother baking pies that smelled like heaven. Samuel would run around chasing balloons, and laughter would fill the air. Those were the moments that painted my childhood in bright colors. But lows came too. When Samuel got sick with pneumonia, I stayed by his bed for nights, praying he would breathe easier. When money ran tight, we ate soup for weeks. And when my mother cried quietly in her room, I pretended not to notice, though my little heart ached. You see, life has a way of mixing sweet with bitter, doesn't it? Now, let me bring you closer to the man who betrayed me. Richard Thompson, my father. He was a man of rules. He demanded respect. If I got a B in school, he scolded me for not being the best. If Samuel got into trouble, he lectured him for hours. But beneath that discipline, I thought there was love. Strong love. Protective love. The kind of love that made me feel safe. But that love was an illusion. I didn't know then, but my father was building a house of secrets. Secrets that one day would come crashing down on me like a roof set on fire. The first time I saw a glimpse of it was when I was about 15. I had been sent to fetch something from his study. I opened a drawer, and inside I saw papers, letters, and a photograph of a woman I didn't recognize. I didn't think much of it then. Maybe a colleague, I told myself. But the way he snatched it from my hands when he caught me, that was the first warning. He said, "Never touch my things again, Margaret." His voice was sharp, colder than winter. I never forgot that look in his eyes. Years passed. Life moved on. I grew into a young woman, went to college, made friends, fell in love for the first time. My father stayed respected in the town, untouchable in the eyes of others. But behind closed doors, I noticed more cracks. He was distant sometimes, restless, easily angered. My mother looked older by the day, her eyes carrying unspoken pain. And then came the night of the letter. I was much older then, but I will never forget the weight of that paper in my hands. It shook my world. The truth was there in black and white. My father's betrayal was no longer hidden, and the person it destroyed most was me. But I will not tell you just yet what that secret was. No, my dears, patience. You must walk with me through the journey, see the kindness, the cracks, the moments that built me up before life broke me down. Only then will the full weight of that betrayal sink in. Because what my father did was not just a mistake. It was a deliberate act that scarred my life forever. And as I sit here now, at 75, I tell you this with fire in my chest. He may have thought he won, but I will make sure he pays. The story of how begins now. I can still feel the tremble in my hands that night. The letter was not long, but each word was like a knife slicing deeper into me. My father's neat handwriting was on it, but the words, oh, those words revealed a man I did not know. I read it once, twice, 3 times, hoping I misunderstood. But no, it was plain as day. My father had another family, another woman, another child. Do you understand what that means? For years, while my mother cooked his meals, cared for his home, and prayed for him, he was giving his love elsewhere. While Samuel and I thought we were his only children, he was raising someone else in secret. He betrayed not just my mother, but me. He destroyed the very image I had of myself. Because if he could lie about that, what else was he hiding? I dropped the letter on the floor and gasped for air. My chest felt heavy, like 100 stones pressing down. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. I wanted to run, but my legs were weak. Do you know the kind of silence that feels louder than thunder? That was the silence in our home that night. The worst part wasn't even the letter itself. It was the fact that my father had hidden this for so many years. And suddenly, my whole life made sense in a painful way. His late nights, his distant stares, his unexplained anger. It was all connected. But I couldn't confront him just then. I was too broken, too confused. So I tucked the letter under my pillow, tears wetting my sheets as I lay awake. The next morning, I rose with swollen eyes. The sun was shining, but it felt cruel, mocking my pain. My mother was in the kitchen making breakfast. She looked tired, the kind of tired that is deeper than sleep. I wondered, did she already know? Had she been living with this truth in silence? Or was she just as blind as me? I smiled at her weakly, though my heart was screaming. Samuel was at the table, cracking jokes, eating toast with peanut butter like nothing was wrong. For a moment, I wanted to protect them from the truth. I thought, maybe if I stay silent, things won't break apart. But deep down, I knew secrets only grow heavier. That morning, I decided to visit my old neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. She was like a grandmother to everyone in town, even though she wasn't blood. Her house always smelled like cinnamon and roses. I needed her calm voice. When I got there, she took one look at me and said, "Child, what's wrong? Your spirit looks crushed." I couldn't tell her everything, not yet. So I said, "I just feel like the ground under me is shaking." She held my hands, her palms warm and soft. "Margaret, when life shakes you, you must plant your roots deeper. Don't break. Bend, but don't break." Her words soothed me, like medicine on a wound. She gave me tea and told me stories of her own hardships, how her husband once betrayed her too, how she found strength by refusing to let bitterness eat her alive. That was the less extreme part of my day, a moment of calm, a reminder of kindness and resilience. It didn't erase the betrayal, but it gave me enough breath to keep standing. Still, my heart would not let me rest. I knew I had to face my father. That evening, when he returned home, the house smelled of roast chicken. My mother was setting the table. Samuel was upstairs, probably reading comics. And I sat there, the letter hidden in my pocket, waiting. He walked in, tall and proud, hanging his coat as if nothing in the world was wrong. He kissed my mother on the cheek, patted my head, and smiled at me. A smile I now hated. I wanted to spit out the truth right there, but fear held me back. My mother's smile froze me. What if I destroyed her world by speaking? What if Samuel's innocence was shattered because of me? But then fate decided for me. As my father reached for his coat pocket, a folded envelope slipped out and fell to the floor. My mother bent down to pick it up. And in that single moment, my blood turned to ice because I recognized the handwriting. It was another letter. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Her eyes darted across the page. And then, she gasped so sharply that the whole house seemed to freeze. The letter slipped from her fingers onto the floor, and my father's face turned pale. "Richard," she whispered, "what is this?" My heart stopped. That was the moment the storm broke. The letter lay on the floor, as silent and deadly as a knife. My mother's hands were shaking, her lips trembling as she looked from the paper to my father's face. "Richard," she whispered again, her voice quivering like a candle flame in the wind, "what is this?" My father reached for the letter quickly, but it was too late. She had already seen enough. Her eyes filled with tears, and I could almost see the weight of 20 years of trust crashing down on her shoulders. I wanted to run, to hide, but my legs were frozen under the table. My heart pounded in my ears. I already knew what the letter contained, the proof of his secret life, the proof that destroyed me the night before. My father's face hardened. He stood tall, as if by sheer pride he could erase what had just been revealed. "Elizabeth," he said, his voice low but sharp, "this isn't what you think." But my mother laughed, not out of humor, but out of disbelief. "Not what I think. Richard, it's your handwriting. These are your words. You have another woman, another child." Samuel, who had been upstairs, heard the commotion and came rushing down. "What's going on?" he asked, his eyes darting between us. He saw my mother crying, my father standing stiff, and me sitting pale and silent. My mother pressed the letter against her chest and turned to my father again. All these years, all the nights you came home late, all the excuses. Was it her? Were you with her? My father did not answer. That silence was louder than any confession. I couldn't hold it anymore. Tears spilled down my cheeks, and I cried out, I knew it. I saw the letter yesterday. I didn't know how to tell you, Mama. The room exploded in sound. My mother gasped. Samuel stared at me in shock. And my father slammed his fist against the table so hard that the plates rattled. Enough, he shouted. His voice was like thunder, making the walls shake. For a long moment, none of us moved. My mother was broken, Samuel was confused, and I was drowning in rage. I thought I would collapse right there. And then, just as quickly as the storm rose, my mother dropped into her chair. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed. Loud, heavy sobs that tore my heart apart. That night, no one ate dinner. The roast chicken sat on the table, untouched, growing cold. Later, when my mother went upstairs to cry alone, Samuel followed her. I stayed in the living room, staring at my father. He lit a cigarette, something he rarely did in the house, and smoked in silence, avoiding my eyes. Why? I finally whispered. My voice was shaky, but my words were sharp. Why would you do this to us? He didn't answer. He just looked away, as if the walls had more right to his attention than his own daughter. That silence was worse than any explanation. I went to bed that night with my heart heavy as stone. I could hear my mother's muffled cries through the walls, Samuel pacing, and my father moving around downstairs. Our house, once filled with warmth, now felt like a battlefield. The next morning, I woke up determined to escape the suffocating air at home. I packed a small bag and decided to visit my Aunt Mary, my mother's younger sister. She lived about an hour away and always welcomed me with open arms. When I arrived, she hugged me tight, noticing immediately that my spirit was crushed. Margaret, what's wrong? You look like you've been carrying the whole world on your back. I broke down in her arms, but I didn't tell her everything. Instead, I said softly, things at home are bad, very bad. She made me sit, gave me tea, and told me stories of her younger days, how she once loved a man who betrayed her too, but how she survived, rebuilt, and found joy again. Sweetheart, she said, stroking my hair like I was still a child. People will hurt you, sometimes even the ones you trust most. But you must not let their choices destroy the kindness in you. If you lose that, you lose yourself. Her words were like balm to my wounded soul. I stayed with her for the afternoon, and for a little while, I felt lighter, even hopeful. That was the less extreme moment, a soft breath in the middle of a storm. But storms, my dear ones, have a way of returning before you are ready. That evening, when I returned home, I walked into a scene I will never forget. My mother stood in the hallway with a suitcase by her side. Her eyes were red from crying, but her jaw was set firm. Samuel was beside her, holding her hand. And there, at the bottom of the stairs, stood my father, his face pale and desperate. Elizabeth, he said, his voice trembling for the first time in my life, don't leave. My mother looked at him with eyes filled not with love, but with fire. Richard, you betrayed me. You betrayed us. I can't stay here anymore. She turned toward the door, gripping the suitcase handle. Samuel clung tighter to her hand. And in that moment, I realized our family was breaking apart. The sound of the suitcase wheels against the wooden floor still echoes in my memory, even after all these years. My mother's hand trembled as she held onto Samuel, her youngest, her baby. She had finally reached her breaking point. Elizabeth, please, my father pleaded, his voice softer than I had ever heard. He was a proud man, a man who rarely begged. But that night, his pride was stripped away. He reached for her arm, but she pulled back. Don't touch me, she snapped, her voice sharp, cutting through the air. You don't get to touch me anymore. Not after what you've done. Samuel's eyes were wide, filled with confusion. He was young, but not so young that he couldn't understand betrayal. He looked between them, torn, holding onto my mother like she was the only safe place left in the world. I stood there frozen, my own heart torn apart. I wanted to scream at my father, to tell him he deserved to lose everything, but I also wanted to beg my mother not to leave. Because deep down I was afraid. Afraid that once she walked out, nothing would ever be the same again. My father dropped to his knees right there on the floor. "Elizabeth," he whispered, his voice cracking, "you are my wife. Please don't do this." But my mother's tears had turned into steel. "You destroyed this family long before tonight. I won't let my children grow up in a house built on lies." And then, with one final look of heartbreak and resolve, she opened the door. The night air rushed in, cold and biting, as she stepped out with Samuel by her side. The door slammed shut, leaving my father and me in silence. The kind of silence that crushes you from the inside out. I wanted to chase after her, but my legs wouldn't move. My father buried his face in his hands, and for the first time, I saw him as something less than strong. I saw him as a broken man. But even in that moment, I couldn't feel pity. Not after what he had done. The next morning, the house was empty. My mother didn't come back, not even for clothes. The rooms felt hollow, stripped of her warmth. The kitchen was silent without her humming, the living room cold without her laughter. I walked through the house slowly, touching walls, touching furniture, feeling the emptiness seep into me. It was as if the house itself was grieving. That day, I tried to keep myself busy. I cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, even baked bread, the way Mama taught me. The smell filled the house, and for a moment, I almost imagined she would walk in and smile at me. But when I looked at the empty chair at the table, the ache in my chest grew heavier. Later that week, I went to see my mother at Aunt Mary's house. Samuel was with her, his laughter a little forced but still there. She hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "Margaret," she whispered, "I wanted to take you too, but you're almost grown now. You'll have to choose for yourself. Just remember this. You are not your father's mistakes. You are stronger than this." Her words gave me comfort, but they also left me torn. I loved my mother with all my heart, but part of me still felt chained to the house I grew up in. It was my home, my memories, my roots. For a short while, life settled into an uneasy rhythm. I split my time between Aunt Mary's house and the old home with my father. He barely spoke to me, his pride wounded, his spirit heavy. Sometimes I heard him late at night, pacing, muttering to himself, as if fighting with ghosts. It was a quieter time, the calm before another storm. One Sunday afternoon, I decided to visit the town library. Books had always been my escape. The smell of paper, the silence of the aisles. It gave me peace when the world felt like it was burning. As I walked through the rows, I spotted something unusual. My father's handwriting. Not on a book, but on a slip of paper tucked into one of the shelves. Curious, I pulled it out. It was a note. Short. Secret. "Meet me tonight at the old oak tree. 9 p.m. R." My heart stopped. This wasn't from years ago. It was recent. My father was still seeing her. Even after my mother left, even after his whole family shattered, he was still sneaking around. I stood there trembling, the paper shaking in my hands. The betrayal wasn't over. It was alive. It was happening right under my nose. I clutched the note, so hard it crumpled. My chest burned with anger, and a thought flashed through my mind, clear as lightning. I have to see this for myself. That night, I waited by the old oak tree. The shadows were long, the air damp and heavy. My heart pounded in my ears as I hid behind the branches, watching, waiting. And then, I saw him, my father, standing there, not alone. Beside him was the woman from the photograph I had once found in his study. She reached for his hand, and he took it, holding her as if she was the only woman in the world. And in that moment, everything inside me shattered all over again. I pressed my back against the rough bark of the oak tree, my breath shallow, my heart racing like it wanted to leap right out of my chest. There he was, my father, Richard Thompson. The man everyone in town called respectable. The man who scolded me about honesty, who taught me to protect the Thompson name. And yet, here he stood, in the shadows, holding hands with another woman. She was younger than my mother, her hair long and dark, her dress clinging to her figure. She looked up at him with a smile that made me sick. "Richard," she whispered, her voice carrying in the night air, "I was afraid you wouldn't come." "I'll always come," he replied. His voice was soft, tender, the kind of voice he hadn't used with my mother in years. My stomach twisted. I wanted to scream. I wanted to jump out from behind that tree and tear the truth open right then and there. But instead, I stood frozen, watching the betrayal unfold before my very eyes. The woman leaned closer. "What about Elizabeth? About the children?" His face darkened, but not with guilt. With annoyance. "Elizabeth made her choice," he said flatly. "And the children, they'll understand one day. Margaret is old enough. Samuel, he's too young to know the difference." I covered my mouth with my hand to stop myself from gasping. He was already rewriting our story in his head, justifying his lies as if they were nothing. I stayed hidden until they finally left, walking hand in hand down the path. And when they were gone, I collapsed against the tree, tears streaming down my face. The truth wasn't just a wound anymore, it was poison. The next day, I couldn't focus on anything. I went through the motions, made breakfast, swept the floor, went into town. But in my mind, all I saw was that image, my father's hand in hers. I tried to distract myself by helping others. Mrs. Jenkins, the old woman I had helped years ago with her groceries, had fallen ill. I visited her with soup and bread, sat by her bedside, and listened to her stories. She smiled weakly at me and said, "Child, the kindness you give now will return to you one day. Don't let sorrow harden your heart." Her words eased me, like a soft breeze on a hot day. For a while, I felt calmer. I reminded myself that no matter what my father did, I had a choice, to let his betrayal turn me bitter, or to rise above it with kindness and strength. But peace never lasted long in those days. That evening, when I returned home, I found my father in the study. He was bent over his desk, writing quickly, his brow furrowed. When he heard me enter, he shoved the papers into a drawer and slammed it shut. "Margaret," he barked, "you should learn to knock." I froze, my eyes on that drawer. My chest tightened. I knew what was inside. More letters, more lies. But before I could say anything, the phone rang. My father jumped, startled, and picked it up quickly. "Hello?" His voice lowered. Yes, I can come. Tonight? All right. I'll be there." He hung up fast, his face pale, his hands shaking just slightly. Then he noticed me staring. "Go to bed," he ordered. "You didn't hear anything." But I had heard enough. Later that night, curiosity and anger drove me. I couldn't sleep. I crept downstairs, careful not to make a sound, and slipped into his study. My hands trembled as I pulled open the drawer he had slammed shut earlier. Inside were stacks of letters, all from the same woman. Words of love, promises, secrets. And at the bottom, something that made my blood run cold. A birth certificate. A child's birth certificate. And the name under father? Richard Thompson. I nearly dropped the paper. My father hadn't just betrayed my mother with another woman. He had a whole child with her. I stood there, my knees weak, my breath uneven, staring at the truth that had been hidden for years. And then I heard it. The creak of the floorboards. I spun around, and there he was. My father stood in the doorway, his eyes dark and furious, catching me red-handed. The paper nearly slipped from my hands as I froze under his stare. My father filled the doorway like a shadow, his eyes locked on the birth certificate clutched in my fingers. "What are you doing in here, Margaret?" His voice was low, but the anger beneath it was sharp enough to cut glass. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My heart pounded so loud I thought it would betray me before I even spoke. I wanted to know the truth. His jaw tightened. He stepped into the room slowly, closing the door behind him with a soft click that felt more like a lock. "You had no right to touch my things." I held the paper tighter, my hands trembling. "No right?" I am your daughter. That makes this my life too. How could you do this, Daddy? How could you have another family, another child, and keep it from us? The word Daddy slipped out by habit, but it felt bitter in my mouth. He snatched the paper from me, crumpling it in his fist. You don't understand, he snapped. Then make me understand. I shouted back, my voice shaking with fury. Mama is broken, Samuel is confused, and I feel like my whole life has been a lie. You taught me to be honest, to protect our name, but look at you. You're a liar. For a moment, his face softened. I saw something flicker in his eyes, shame, maybe regret. But it vanished quickly, replaced by steel. Life is complicated, Margaret. I made choices you're too young to understand. You think the world is black and white, but it isn't. Sometimes a man does what he must. I stared at him, disbelief flooding me. No. A man does what's right. You chose betrayal. You chose lies. The tension in the room was so heavy it felt like the walls might collapse. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of him. For the first time, I stood tall, even though my knees wanted to buckle. He opened his mouth as if to say more, but instead, he turned away. Go to bed, Margaret. You'll forget this. Forget? How could I ever forget? I stormed out of the study, my chest heaving, my hands still shaking from the confrontation. Upstairs in my room, I sat by the window, staring at the moon, tears sliding silently down my cheeks. I felt shattered, but I also felt a strange strength building inside me. That night, I made myself a promise. I would not stay silent. I would not let him bury the truth again. The next few days passed in a blur. My mother stayed with Aunt Mary, Samuel with her most of the time too. I visited often, helping Mama with chores, trying to lift her spirits. She looked tired, her face pale, but she managed small smiles for me. Margaret, she said one evening as we folded laundry together, you remind me of myself when I was your age, but stronger. Don't lose that strength, even when life feels unbearable. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I wanted to tell her about the birth certificate, but the words caught in my chest. How could I pile more weight on her already broken heart? So I stayed quiet for now. At school, I threw myself into my studies, trying to find a sense of normalcy. Friends noticed my distance, but I brushed it off. Books became my shield, pages my escape. But no matter how hard I tried to distract myself, the secret gnawed at me. I could still see my father's furious eyes, still hear the crumple of the paper in his hand. And then one night, fate struck again. I was walking home from the library, the streetlights flickering, the cool air brushing my skin. As I turned the corner toward her house, I saw a figure standing by the gate. A woman. The same woman from the photograph. She stood tall, her eyes fixed on me as if she had been waiting. Her lips curved into a slight smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. Margaret, she said softly, her voice smooth like silk, but sharp underneath. We need to talk. My breath caught. How did she know my name? Before I could reply, she stepped closer, her perfume heavy in the air. I'm the woman your father loves. And I think it's time you heard my side of the story. For a moment, I couldn't move. The woman's words hung in the air like a dark spell, pulling me in and pushing me away at the same time. She knew my name, she knew who I was, and she claimed to be the woman my father loved. I glanced at the gate, then back at her. How do you know me? My voice shook, though I tried to sound braver than I felt. She tilted her head, studying me like I was a puzzle she had already solved. Your father told me everything. About your family, your mother, your brother, and you. Her tone was calm, almost too calm, like she had been rehearsing these words. My stomach turned. Why are you here? She took a slow step closer, her eyes locking on mine. Because lies can only live in the dark for so long. Your father has lied to you, to your mother, and to me. And now, Margaret, you deserve to know the truth. I wanted to run, but my feet were rooted to the ground. What truth? I whispered. She smiled faintly, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had suffered, who carried a secret heavy enough to crush a heart. The truth is, your father promised me a life. He told me he loved me, that he would leave your mother for me. He said we'd raise our child together, build a family of our own. I gave him everything, and in return, he gave me betrayal. Her voice cracked, but her eyes stayed sharp, like daggers. My heart slammed against my ribs. So the child. She nodded, her jaw tight. He's mine. He's your brother, Margaret. Flesh and blood. He doesn't even know you exist because your father kept us hidden. Kept me hidden. The ground seemed to tilt beneath me. A brother? Another life? Another family that mirrored mine but lived in the shadows? I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but no words came. You see, she continued, stepping even closer, your father is not the man you think he is. He tells everyone he's a man of honor, but he's a coward. He hides behind lies, leaving broken pieces in his wake. And soon, those lies will destroy him. She leaned in, her breath warm against my ear. But you, Margaret, you can decide which side of the truth you want to stand on. And just like that, she turned and walked away, her footsteps fading into the night, leaving me trembling under the streetlight. I stood there for what felt like hours, trying to breathe, trying to think. My father's betrayal was worse than I imagined. Not only had he betrayed my mother, but he had built a life with another woman, promised her love, and left her stranded with a child. And now, that child was my brother. When I finally walked inside the house, I felt like I was walking into a cage filled with secrets. The walls seemed thinner, the air heavier. My father's voice drifted from the study, low and commanding, but I couldn't bear to look at him. I went straight to my room, where I buried my face in my pillow and let the tears come. The next day, life carried on as if nothing had changed. Mama smiled weakly at the breakfast table, Samuel played with his toy cars, and my father read the newspaper, like always. But to me, everything had changed. Every glance, every silence carried weight. I replayed the woman's words again and again. He's your brother, flesh and blood. At school, I couldn't concentrate. I drifted through the day like a ghost, smiling when friends spoke, but not hearing a word they said. I longed to tell someone, anyone, but who could I trust? If I told Mama, it would break her more. If I told Samuel, it would confuse him. And if I confronted my father again, I didn't know what he might do. So I kept it inside, the secret growing heavier by the day. Until one evening, when fate made the choice for me. I had just returned home from Aunt Mary's when I heard raised voices coming from the study. I froze in the hallway, pressing myself against the wall, straining to listen. You shouldn't have come here. It was my father, his voice furious. I had to. The woman's voice, the same one from the street, rang clear and strong. I won't be ignored any longer. He deserves to know who his father is. My breath caught. She was here. In my house. There was a sharp thud, like something hitting the desk. My father growled, "You'll ruin everything. Do you think Margaret and Samuel won't find out? Do you think my wife won't crumble to pieces if she hears this? You'll destroy us all." Her reply was cold, steady. "You already destroyed yourself." I felt my knees weaken. They were arguing about the child, about my brother. The truth was clawing its way to the surface, and nothing could stop it now. But then, suddenly, the room went silent. Too silent. And a few seconds later, the study door flew open. The woman stormed out, her eyes blazing, and right behind her was my father, his hand gripping her arm too tightly. They both froze when they saw me standing there in the hallway, wide-eyed, caught between fear and fury. "Margaret," my father said, his face pale, his grip tightening. "Go upstairs. Now." But the woman yanked her arm free, pointing at me. "No, let her hear it. Let her know the truth you've buried for years. She deserves to hear it all, right now." Her voice rang through the hallway, like a bell that could not be unrung. She deserves to hear it all, right now. My father's face darkened, his eyes burning with a mixture of rage and desperation. For a long moment no one moved. The air was so thick with tension that even Samuel, who had been playing in the sitting room, crept to the edge of the doorway, clutching his toy car and staring wide-eyed at the scene before him. "Get out," my father hissed at the woman. "This is not your home. You have no right to stand here." But she didn't move. Instead, she turned to me, her expression softening just slightly. "Margaret, you need to know who your father really is. He is not just the man who sits at the head of your table. He is not just the one who taught you how to ride a bicycle or praised you when you did well in school. He is also the man who lied to your mother, who lied to you, who lied to me." My chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, but I couldn't look away. My father's fists were clenched, his whole body rigid. "He promised me marriage," she continued, her voice trembling now, not with fear but with the weight of memory. "He promised he would leave your mother and build a life with me. And when I gave birth to his son, he promised to raise him as his own." My stomach dropped, my hands trembling at my sides. "His son?" Her eyes met mine. "Yes. Your brother. His name is David. He's 8 years old, Margaret. And he has lived every day of his life wondering why his father only visits in secret, why his father won't claim him. Do you know what it feels like to watch your child cry because he thinks he isn't good enough to be loved openly?" Her words pierced me like a knife. An image of a small boy, hidden away, unloved, formed in my mind, and it broke something deep inside me. "No," my father snapped, his voice echoing off the walls. "Enough of this nonsense. Margaret, don't listen to her. She's trying to poison you against me. She's bitter. She's angry because she didn't get what she wanted." The woman's face hardened again, her voice sharp as glass. "What I wanted was the truth. What I wanted was for him to be the father he claimed he was. But he isn't. He's a coward." "Stop it." My voice cracked as it tore from my throat. "Just stop." Both of them turned to look at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in my father's eyes. Not fear of her, not fear of me knowing the truth, but fear of losing control. You lied to us all," I whispered, tears filling my eyes. "You betrayed Mama. You betrayed me. And now I have a brother I never knew existed because of you." My father stepped toward me, his hand outstretched. "Margaret, listen." But I stepped back. "Don't touch me." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Samuel's small sniffles as he hugged his toy car closer, his young mind trying to make sense of the storm around him. The woman placed a hand on my shoulder gently. "You don't have to stand in his shadow anymore. You deserve the truth, Margaret. And if he won't give it to you, I will." She pulled a folded envelope from her purse and pressed it into my hand. "Read this when you're ready. It will tell you everything." Before my father could stop her, she walked out the front door, her heels clicking against the porch steps, leaving behind a silence that screamed louder than words. I stood frozen in the hallway, clutching the envelope, my heart pounding like a drum. My father looked at me, his face pale, his eyes pleading now instead of commanding. "Margaret, don't read it. Please. Some things are better left unknown." But I already knew there was no going back. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone by the light of my bedside lamp, the envelope burning in my hands. I hesitated, my fingers trembling, before finally breaking the seal. Inside was a stack of letters, written in my father's handwriting. Love letters. Promises. Lies carved onto paper. Words declaring his devotion to the other woman, his plans for a new life, his joy at the birth of David. Each letter cut deeper than the last, tearing apart whatever scraps of faith I still had in him. And then I found it, the last letter in the stack, written only weeks ago. It wasn't just filled with love. It was filled with plans. Plans to send money overseas. Plans to buy land in another state. Plans that included David, but not us. My hands shook so violently, I nearly dropped the paper. He wasn't just lying. He was planning to leave us. The words blurred as fresh tears filled my eyes, but I kept reading, my heart thundering louder with every sentence. "Soon, my love, it will all be over. I'll send Margaret and Samuel to boarding school. Mary will have no choice but to move on without me. Then it will be you, me, and David, finally free. The letter slipped from my trembling fingers onto the floor. The room spun, my chest tightened, and I could barely breathe. So this was his plan. To abandon us. To abandon me. My father wasn't just a liar. He wasn't just a betrayer. He was preparing to erase us like we never mattered. I pressed both hands over my mouth to keep from screaming, but the sobs still came, shaking my whole body. I thought of Mama, her kind eyes, her gentle voice. How she'd sacrificed everything for him, how she had loved him with her whole heart. I thought of Samuel, so young and innocent, who still believed his father was a hero. And I thought of myself, the daughter, who had spent years looking up to a man who was secretly building a life that didn't include her. I wanted to run into Mama's arms and tell her everything, but I knew the truth might break her completely. And I couldn't let Samuel hear it yet. He was too little to carry this weight. So I sat alone, holding the letters, the betrayal pounding in my veins like fire. The next morning, I woke with swollen eyes but a hard resolve in my chest. At breakfast, my father sat in his usual place, sipping coffee, pretending everything was normal. But when his gaze flicked to me, I didn't look away. For the first time, I let him see the anger burning inside me. He shifted uncomfortably, then cleared his throat. "Margaret, after school today, come straight home. We need to talk." His voice was calm, but his eyes told another story. He knew I had read the letters. All day, I couldn't focus. My teachers' voices became distant echoes. My friends' laughter rang hollow. I carried the weight of the envelope in my school bag, as if it were a ticking clock counting down to the end of my world. When I got home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Samuel was at Aunt Mary's again. Mama was resting in her room, and my father was waiting for me in the study. The moment I stepped inside, he shut the door behind me. "You opened the envelope." It wasn't a question. I nodded slowly, my fists clenched at my sides. "You were going to leave us." He sighed, running a hand over his face. For the first time, he looked old to me. Not powerful, not untouchable, just tired and trapped. "Margaret, you don't understand. I've been living a lie for too long. I tried to keep both families together, but it's tearing me apart. I can't keep this charade going." My chest tightened. "So your solution is to throw us away like trash?" "No." His voice cracked. "It's not about throwing you away. I'll make sure you, your brother, and your mother are taken care of. You'll never want for anything. But I need to be where my heart truly belongs." The words hit me like knives. He was choosing them over us. Choosing David over Samuel. Choosing lies over loyalty. I stared at him, tears stinging my eyes, but anger fueling my voice. "Do you even hear yourself? You're not a father. You're a coward. And one day, everyone will know exactly what you've done." His face hardened. "Careful, Margaret. You don't know the kind of damage those words could do." "Oh, I do," I whispered. "And maybe that's the point." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, with trembling hands, I pulled the stack of letters from my school bag and slammed them onto his desk. "If you think I'll stay quiet while you destroy us, you're wrong. I will not let you walk away like we don't matter." His face drained of color, but his eyes narrowed. "You don't know what you're playing with, Margaret. You could ruin everything." I leaned closer, my voice low but steady. "Good. Because you ruined me first." I turned and stormed out of the study before he could say another word. My legs shook as I climbed the stairs, but my heart felt steadier than it had in weeks. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I knew I couldn't keep this secret forever. The truth was heavy, and it needed to be freed. But before I could decide what to do next, another blow fell. A knock came at the front door well past midnight. I crept from my room and peeked down the staircase. My father answered, and standing there in the doorway was the woman again, but this time, she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a small boy with dark curls and wide, curious eyes. David, my half-brother. And as their eyes met mine across the hall, I knew nothing in our lives would ever be the same again. David's eyes were wide, innocent, and filled with questions he was too young to even form. He clutched the woman's hand, his mother's hand, as if it were his lifeline, and when his gaze met mine, something inside me broke. He looked like Samuel. He looked like me. He looked like my father. I gripped the railing, my knuckles white. Below, my father froze in the doorway, caught between the two worlds he had built. Behind him was the life he wanted to leave. In front of him stood the life he had been hiding. The woman's voice sliced through the silence. "It's time, Charles. He deserves to know the truth. They all deserve to know." Mama appeared from the sitting room, her robe pulled tightly around her, confusion clouding her tired eyes. "Charles, what is going on?" My father's face paled. He looked from Mama to Samuel, who had wandered in behind her, then up to me on the stairs. All of us staring at him, waiting. The walls of lies had finally crumbled. The woman squeezed David's hand and stepped forward. "Mary, this is David. He's your husband's son. My son." The words cracked like thunder. Mama staggered back, her hand clutching her chest. Samuel's toy car dropped to the floor with a clatter. I couldn't breathe. "No," Mama whispered, shaking her head. "No, that can't be true." But the truth stood there in the doorway, small and innocent, his eyes mirroring the man who had betrayed us all. Tears slid down Mama's cheeks. "Charles, tell me she's lying." My father opened his mouth, but no sound came. His silence was the loudest confession of all. Mama crumpled to her knees, her sobs echoing through the hall. Samuel ran to her, clinging to her side, confused and afraid. And I felt a rage rise inside me, hotter than fire, sharper than glass. I stormed down the stairs, my footsteps pounding. I stood face to face with my father, my voice trembling but fierce. "You destroyed us. You betrayed us. You broke Mama's heart. You lied to Samuel, and you left me with nothing but pain. You don't deserve this family." His lips trembled. "Margaret, please." "No," I shouted, my voice cracking. "You took everything from us, and now you'll pay." The woman's eyes glistened as she held David close. She didn't gloat, didn't smile. She looked as broken as Mama, though in a different way. I turned to Mama, kneeling beside her, wrapping my arms around her trembling shoulders. "We don't need him," I whispered. "We'll survive without him. We'll be stronger without him." She clung to me, her tears wetting my shoulder. For the first time, I felt like the protector, not the child. That night, my father packed his bags. There were no more excuses, no more lies left to shield him. He left with the woman and David, the door slamming shut behind him like a final nail in the coffin of our family. The house felt emptier than ever. The silence was heavy, but it was no longer filled with secrets. Just grief. The days that followed were hard. Mama cried often. Samuel asked questions I couldn't answer, and I carried the weight of anger like a stone in my chest. But slowly, very slowly, we began to heal. Neighbors brought food, Aunt Mary stayed with us more, and I worked harder than ever to help Mama keep the house together. Life wasn't easy. It was never easy after that night. But we found strength in each other. We learned to live without his shadow, to laugh again, to dream again. Years later, when I was grown, I saw my father once more. He was older, weaker, a man worn down by regret. He looked at me with hollow eyes and whispered, "Margaret, I'm sorry." But by then, sorry was too small, too late. I stood tall, remembering every tear, every lie, every broken piece he had left behind. And I told him the truth. "You took everything from me, but I took everything back."